At our daughter's wedding, I sat in the seat of honor, but it felt more like a spotlight for the fool. She looked radiant, our daughter beaming beside her new husband, I sparkling like she'd swallowed starlight. Everyone said she looked just like her mother. I used to agree. Today, I wasn't so sure. I sat at the head of the table. The father of the bride. Smiles, toasts, applause. But my skin itched like my suit was woven from glass. Because as I raised my glass to give a speech, my eyes drifted. Not to the couple. To my wife. She wasn't watching our daughter. She was watching someone else. He was sitting 3 tables over, tucked behind a floral centerpiece, talking to a man in a gray suit. But when her eyes found his, it was like gravity tilted sideways. She smiled small, restrained. Not the smile you give a friend. The kind you try to hide when your body betrays you. And when his lips curled into that knowing smirk, something inside me turned to ice. I stumbled through the speech. People clapped, but I couldn't hear it. My ears were filled with a low hum, like static, like denial whispering that it couldn't be what it looked like. But I knew. Because I've seen that look before. She used to give it to me. Back when we were the couple people toasted. Back when her gaze softened like sunlight on a lake whenever I walked into the room. Now it was sharp. Focused. Directed at a man who wasn't me. The rest of the night passed in fragments. Champagne. Laughter. Clinking glasses. But I wasn't there. I was orbiting something I couldn't name yet. Something just beyond reach. Every time I looked at her, I tried to convince myself it was nothing. A coincidence. A trick of the light. But then came the final dance. Everyone circled the bride and groom, arms swaying, phones flashing. And my wife? She wasn't filming our daughter. She wasn't even clapping. She was standing by the terrace doors, whispering to him. Close. Too close. Her hand brushed his elbow in that way that says, I remember. And then he laughed, that soft, secretive kind of laugh, the kind you share only with someone who's known your body. My chest tightened. The music blurred. That was the moment I stopped pretending. They say you can feel betrayal in your bones before your brain can process it. I believe it now. Because sitting in that spotlight at what was supposed to be the proudest day of my life, I felt like an actor in someone else's play. And everyone else knew the ending but me. The father of the bride. Smiling. Toasting. Clapping. While his wife watched her lover across the room. She stood to speak, confident, glowing, rehearsed. But I'd heard that tone before, late at night when she wanted to wound. The room loved her. Of course they did. She had always been the kind of woman who knew how to step into a spotlight like it owed her something. She raised the mic with both hands like it was sacred, let the silence stretch just long enough to command the room, then opened with a story that made everyone laugh, loud, genuine, unaware. But I wasn't listening to the words. I was listening to the tone. Because while everyone else heard a charming mother giving a speech for her daughter's big day, I heard something else. I heard that voice, the one she used when she wanted to make me feel small. When her words were wrapped in silk but left bruises anyway. And then, just for a moment, her eyes drifted. Not to me. Never to me. But to him, the same man from earlier, seated casually at the edge of the room like a secret too bold to hide. He smiled at her, almost imperceptibly. Like he already knew the punchline to the joke she was telling. Like they were sharing something beneath the surface in a language only they spoke. And she smiled back. It was nothing if you didn't know what to look for. But I did. I watched that smile flicker across her lips like a match she meant to strike but didn't mean to be seen. Her hand brushed her necklace, the one I gave her years ago. Not sentimentally, nervously. Her tell. Always her tell. That was the moment the applause turned hollow. They laughed. They clapped. They teared up at the sentimental bits. But I sat there, motionless, feeling like I was watching a puppet show where I'd once been the co-star. I didn't know the lines anymore. I wasn't part of the act. My eyes moved from her to him, to his drink left half full, to the way he looked at her, not like a guest looks at a hostess, but like a man who's seen her undressed, emotionally or otherwise. And still, I told myself, you're being paranoid. Until she said the line that gutted me. She was talking about our daughter's new husband. You found someone who sees you, really sees you, even when you don't see yourself. Her voice caught just slightly. Only I would have noticed. Because I'd heard the catch before on the nights we fought, when she accused me of not listening, not watching, not knowing the woman she was becoming. The room sighed, charmed. I blinked, stunned. Because that wasn't about our daughter. Not really. That was for him. It hit me like a slow unraveling. A thread pulled loose while everyone clapped, smiled, toasted champagne. The beginning of a story that had clearly already started, and I was only now noticing the prologue. The rest of her speech went off flawlessly. They rose to their feet when she finished. People wiped their eyes. The DJ cued the music. But I just sat there. Still, alone at the head of the table, applauding a woman who'd written me out of the script. Some jokes aren't meant to be funny. They're just dressed that way. Some girls marry rich, and some make mistakes. The words hit like a slap in velvet gloves. The laughter that followed came in waves, too loud, too eager, as if the room didn't know whether to laugh or cringe, so it chose the safer option. Applause. Amusement. Another joke from the dazzling, effortlessly charming mother of the bride. But I knew better. Because I was the mistake. She didn't look at me when she said it. She looked into the crowd the way performers do when they're too afraid to meet the eyes of the person they're actually talking about. But I saw the flicker of something on her face, a pause, a hard swallow, a microsecond of hesitation before the mask slid back on. I smiled too. Or at least I moved my face in a way that resembled one. It was muscle memory at this point. We'd been married long enough that I could perform on cue. But inside, something ruptured, not all at once, just a slow, seeping tear. And then I saw him. Across the table. Front row. Hands trembling. David. My best man. 28 years ago, he stood beside me in a tux that didn't quite fit, nervously holding the rings, his eyes brimming with pride for the life we were all about to step into. We'd been inseparable through breakups, bad jobs, bachelor parties, and new babies. He was family in every way that counted. Now he looked like he wanted to vanish. His jaw was clenched tight, like he was physically holding something in. His drink sat untouched, sweating into the napkin beneath it. And when our eyes met, he didn't smile. He didn't nod. He flinched. That was the moment I stopped breathing. Just for a second. Just long enough to feel the silence roar inside me. Because I knew that look. It was shame. It was fear. It was the look of a man who'd been found out or was about to be. I looked back at my wife. Her hand was resting on the mic stand, fingers tapping a rhythm I didn't recognize. Her posture was perfect. Her laugh effortless. But her eyes were somewhere else entirely. She wasn't just performing. She was hiding in plain sight. And suddenly, her joke, wasn't funny anymore. It wasn't meant to be. It was a confession disguised as humor. A wound stitched with charm. And in that moment, surrounded by laughter and champagne, I felt like I was sinking into something cold and bottomless. They always say the truth comes out eventually. No one ever tells you it might arrive wearing a smile. He couldn't look at me, and that told me everything. I called his name softly. Not aloud. Just in my mind. David. The kid I once built forts with. The one who taught me how to kiss using a pillow and a warped sense of confidence. The man who stood beside me on the most important day of my life, trembling with nerves and joy. Now, he wouldn't meet my eyes. Not once. His shoulders were hunched unnaturally tight beneath his blazer. His fists curled around the silverware like it might anchor him to the moment. His eyes, fixed, unblinking, stared down at his untouched plate like it might open up and swallow him whole. And I realized then I didn't need an affair to be confirmed. Because what he wasn't saying told me more than a confession ever could. His silence was a siren. His stillness a scream. I'd spent weeks, maybe months, doubting my instincts, brushing off late-night phone calls, dismissing the nervous glances between them as stress, fatigue, imagination. But sitting there, watching him crumble under the weight of his own guilt, the denial I'd been clinging to slipped quietly out the back door. I saw the whole story without hearing a word of it. The way she laughed a little too freely when he was near. The tension in her shoulders whenever I entered the room mid-conversation. The quick, hushed texts that ended the moment I got home. At the time, they were just shadows. But now? Now they had form. And a name. David. I swallowed hard, the taste of champagne turning to rust on my tongue. He shifted in his chair like it burned him. One hand reached for his water glass, but it stopped halfway, shaking just enough to betray him. And still, he never looked at me. Cowardice, they say, wears many faces. But none are more devastating than the one you've known your whole life. I turned back toward the head table where my wife sat radiant under the twinkling lights. She was laughing with someone, maybe an aunt, maybe her reflection. It didn't matter. Because the sound didn't reach her eyes. Not anymore. And in that silence between us, as the music swelled and the clinking glasses blurred into white noise, I felt something inside me shift. Not explode. Not scream. Just break. Quietly. Permanently. The kind of break that leaves no bruises, just a void where something sacred used to live. It wasn't the betrayal itself that hollowed me out. It was that look. Or rather, the lack of one. He couldn't look at me. Because if he did, he knew I'd see everything. And I did. You don't notice the pattern until the last piece clicks into place. The human mind is good at hiding things from itself better than any liar, better than any thief. It wraps the truth in layers of comfort, of routine, of maybe it's nothing. Until suddenly, one moment, one look, and it all comes undone. That moment had passed. The lie had been pierced. And now, the memories flooded in, not new, just newly understood. The late-night work calls, muffled through bathroom doors, her voice light and laughing, but stopping the moment I got close. The kind of laughter you only share with someone who makes you feel seen. I remember standing outside that door once, pretending I'd forgotten my toothbrush and hearing her whisper, "No, he's asleep." That should have been enough. It wasn't. Then there was the way she'd started wearing perfume to places that didn't warrant it, grocery runs, coffee shops, yoga classes. "I just want to feel pretty," she said once. And I believed her. God help me, I wanted to believe her. But belief is a fragile thing when you have to bend your spine around it every day just to keep it standing. I thought about all the small moments I had brushed aside. How she never played with her wedding ring anymore, said it was getting tight. But she wore other rings. Bigger ones. Flashier. Ones I hadn't bought. How she'd go quiet when I talked about our future, vacations, retirement, even what color to repaint the kitchen. Her eyes would drift. Her answers clipped. As if I was talking about someone else's life. And David. God, David. There were signs there too. The way his stories started including her more than me. She said the funniest thing the other day, we ran into someone you know, always we, never you. I had chalked it up to friendship. Familiarity. We'd all known each other for decades. But now I saw the pattern. Every room I walked into, they pulled back just a little. Like shadows reacting to a light they didn't expect. Like guilt in motion. And her contempt. I remembered that the clearest of all. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even obvious. It was in the way she'd roll her eyes when I tried to make her laugh. The way she'd sigh when I didn't load the dishwasher her way. The way she started talking to me like I was a task she'd forgotten to complete, something always half done, always slightly disappointing. I thought it was stress. Aging. The slow erosion of a long marriage. But no, it was decay. And now that the last piece had clicked into place, the whole picture stood before me in hideous clarity. It had been there all along. She had been gone long before I noticed. And he, the man I once called my brother, had been the one walking beside her into that distance. I sat there, in a room full of music and laughter and family, but all I could hear was the sound of a door that had been closing behind me for years. I just hadn't wanted to turn around and see it. Our daughter beamed. The guests laughed. But I sat in a room full of ghosts. They called it a perfect day. The kind people write about in cards, glossy and unreal, sunlight breaking just right through the trees, champagne flutes sparkling, music drifting like a dream. Everyone danced. Everyone laughed. Everyone lived in that golden sliver of time where nothing could go wrong. Except me. I wasn't in the room. Not really. I was floating above it, watching it all unfold like a memory already fading, already corrupted by truth. My daughter, my beautiful girl, spun in her white dress like it had wings. Her husband held her close. They looked like everything young love promises. And I should have felt joy. I tried. God, I tried. But my body was just a shell. I clapped at the speeches, I raised my glass, I even smiled at the jokes, but inside I was unraveling. Because all I could see were ghosts. Not the kind that haunt halls. The kind that sit beside you at dinner, laugh in your face, wear your last name. The kind that live in the absence of something that used to be sacred. Our wedding came rushing back, not as a sweet memory, but a cruel echo. The vows I wrote. The trembling in her hands when she slid the ring onto mine. The way she whispered always. And standing beside me then, holding the rings and grinning like an idiot, was him. David. My best man. My best friend. And now? Now he was the man she looked at with warmth. Not me. Not the man who raised a daughter with her. Who stayed through every storm, every sleepless night, every season of quiet distance. I was the one who carried the weight, but he got the light. Every time her gaze landed on him, it softened. Just slightly. Just enough. Enough to cut me open. I watched her toast our daughter and son-in-law with a glow I hadn't seen in years. She looked alive, vibrant, like something inside her had been reignited. And I knew it wasn't the wedding. It was him. It's a strange thing, grieving someone who's still sitting beside you. Laughing. Drinking. Wearing the dress you bought, the ring you gave, the name you shared. But she wasn't mine anymore. Not really. I looked at her and felt like I was watching a stranger wear my wife's face. The ghosts were everywhere. Our past. My trust. His loyalty. All of it hollow now, echoes pretending to be real. So I sat there, in the seat of honor, at a table dressed in white and gold, surrounded by people who thought they were witnessing a beginning. But for me, it was an ending. A requiem dressed as a celebration. And no one noticed the man at the head of the table was mourning something he hadn't even buried yet. I could have stood. I could have screamed. I did nothing. She handed the mic back like a performer taking a final bow. The applause rolled on like thunder, not for the speech, not really, but for the illusion she wrapped around it so tightly no one even thought to look beneath. She was triumphant. He was shattered. And I was invisible. David kept his eyes down. He didn't clap. He didn't smile. His shame clung to him like a soaked jacket, heavy, suffocating, inescapable. Every time someone passed to shake his hand or raise a glass, he flinched like a man being dragged back into the fire, he said. I sat perfectly still. Not because I was calm. Because if I moved even slightly, I was afraid the truth would spill out of me wild and uncontrollable. I could have stood up. I could have stopped the music and the toasts and the dancing and shouted, "Do you want to know what this woman has done? Do you want to know who she really smiles for?" But what would that have done? No one would have believed me. Not in that moment. Not with her still glowing under the chandelier lights, her arm around our daughter, her laugh echoing through the hall like nothing had ever been broken. I looked like every other father at a wedding. I had a smile on my face. There were pictures to prove it. Pictures where I'm clapping. Pictures where I'm toasting. Pictures where I'm watching the woman who destroyed our marriage slow dance beneath twinkle lights and pretending to be proud. And maybe that's what hurt the most. Not the betrayal itself, but the quiet, suffocating knowledge that I had to sit through it. Smile through it. Die through it and let no one see. They say heartbreak is loud, messy, cinematic. They're wrong. Sometimes it's the quietest man in the room. The one sitting perfectly still. Smiling just enough to go unnoticed. Dying just enough not to interrupt the party. He came to me after midnight. Eyes bloodshot. Voice cracking. The party was over, but the music hadn't stopped. It just moved from the speakers inside to the drunken laughter spilling across the gravel behind the venue. Most people were too drunk or too tired to notice the man standing by the catering trucks, shaking. But I noticed. I had gone back there for air. For space. For anything that didn't smell like her perfume or sound like another toast to forever. And there he was. David. His tie undone, his hands twitching like he wanted to light a cigarette but couldn't remember how. His eyes were red, not from drink, not entirely. From guilt. From finally seeing himself the way I had seen him all day. He stepped toward me like someone approaching the edge of a cliff. Not to jump, but to confess. Like the truth had become a burden too heavy to carry back into the car with his wife. I have to talk, he said. I didn't answer. I just looked at him, really looked, and in that silence, I watched him fold. It just happened, he started, voice cracking. That line, it just happened. As if betrayal is an accident. As if 2 years of secrets and shared hotel rooms can be filed under oops. He told me it started slowly. That they'd grown close after one of our fights. That he never meant for it to become physical. That it didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything. 2 years. My best friend. My wife. And I was supposed to feel better because it didn't mean anything. He said it was over. Said they ended it a few months ago. That they agreed not to say anything. Not to ruin things. Ruin what? I wanted to ask. Our friendship? My marriage? The father of the bride's speech I gave while she looked at him with soft eyes and I pretended not to bleed? He said he was sorry. That he hated himself. That he couldn't sleep anymore. He begged me to say something. Anything. But there was nothing left. No fury. No forgiveness. No words. Just a deep, still quiet, the kind you feel underwater, when you've sunk too low to hear the world above. So I looked at him one last time. At the man I grew up with. The man who once swore he'd protect my family if anything ever happened to me. And then I turned. I walked away, and left him with the silence he'd earned. She never confessed. She didn't have to. She hummed while doing the dishes. That was the first thing I noticed when we got back. That she could still hum. Still smile. Still fold the laundry with perfect corners and ask me about my day like we hadn't just survived a wedding haunted by everything unspoken. But I saw it. The shift. The silence between us had changed shape. It wasn't avoidance anymore. It was conquest. She moved through the house like it belonged solely to her now. Every drawer she opened. Every light she turned off. Her footsteps didn't ask permission. They declared ownership. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. Because she didn't have to. She knew I knew. And more importantly, she knew I wouldn't say a word. There was something terrifying in that kind of confidence. The way she dared me with her silence. The way she poured me coffee with steady hands and waited, just long enough, to see if I'd break. I didn't. But not because I was strong. Because I was hollow. We lived like shadows of ourselves. Not even enemies, not even roommates. Just two ghosts haunting the same square footage. We passed each other in the hallway without touch, without tension. It was like watching a marriage decompose in real time. No screams, no slamming doors, just the slow suffocation of what used to be sacred. Sometimes I'd wake in the middle of the night and find her sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. I never asked what she was thinking. I didn't need to. Everything between us was unspoken now. Even our daughter noticed. She called once and asked why we sounded so far away. I told her we were just tired. She believed me, or she wanted to. I'd walk through the kitchen and remember the nights we danced barefoot on that tile floor. The way she used to lean into me when the world was too loud. And now, I couldn't even reach her voice. Every room echoed with what she stole. Not just trust, not just love, but the rhythm of a life, the quiet, invisible thread that ties two people together in the spaces between words. She'd severed it, and she stood there, humming, folding towels, refilling the sugar jar, like nothing had happened. But something had, and it was still happening. Every single day. They laughed at the wedding. I remember that most of all. The laughter, that's what stuck with me. Not the betrayal. Not the confession behind the catering trucks. Not even the way she looked at him when she thought I wasn't watching. It was the laughter. It rolled across that room like thunder on a clear day. Pure, thoughtless, full of people who believed in what they were clapping for. They didn't know the speech was a mask. That the smile on her face was stitched together with lies. That every toast, every cheer, every joke with an edge was another knife slipping under the skin. They didn't know, but I did. And I remember thinking how many betrayals happen in broad daylight. How many are disguised as a joke? A glance? A silence? Our daughter still calls. She thinks we're fine. She tells stories from that night. How beautiful her mother looked. How proud I seemed. How perfect everything felt. And I nod. I laugh sometimes. It's easy over the phone. Maybe we are fine. In a way, we've reached a quiet rhythm, she and I, like strangers who've memorized each other's routines. She brews the coffee. I take out the trash. We talk about the weather, the bills, the neighbors. But never about that night. Never about him. And never ever about us. Because there is no us. Not anymore. Just a house. A routine. A performance we've agreed to continue. For peace. For dignity. For our daughter. I stayed. Not for her. For the girl in white who danced under fairy lights and never saw the storm cloud overhead. I stayed so her memory of that day would stay golden. So her smile wouldn't fracture under the weight of something she never asked for. But the truth? I left that room long before the cake was cut. Long before the final song. Long before they clapped and cried and held each other under chandeliers. I left the moment I realized I was the only one who wasn't laughing. Not because I couldn't, but because I finally understood. Some betrayals don't scream. They whisper. In public. In plain sight. And always with a smile.